Have you ever realized how hard it is to find a DM or a GM for your preferred game system? It's actually so common for a system to put the most work and most weight on the game master or the dungeon master, depending on the game. Let's talk about how we can make a game system easier and more accessible to GM, and let's talk about what other systems have already done to make this happen. Hi, my name is Timothy, and I actually have been making games of various types for almost 20 years. And this channel is all about how we can make games more accessible for both veterans and newbies. We want veterans to be able to quickly and easily find the system that works good for maybe a specific story, or maybe they've been playing D&D for just a little too long and they realize there might be a better option out there. So we're going to talk about lots of different systems and different mechanics and help people find what's best for them. So, talking about GMs or DMs and how much weight is actually put on them, let's talk about why that is. In Dungeons & Dragons, the weight of storytelling and even preparation for the world and even planning when and where the session is, and there's so many things that end up landing on the GM or the DM that really doesn't have to. And it's a system thing, and sometimes it's a culture thing. I say culture meaning it's the culture of just the people who play that game tend to expect certain things. So we're going to break down some of the expectations and some of the game mechanics that lean into making it actually hard to DM or GM for different games. So Dungeons & Dragons is a prime example of so much weight lands on the game master or the dungeon master. Whereas another example, the newer game that is Daggerheart, made by Critical Role and Darrington Press. And Daggerheart is interesting in that it actually takes some of the power away from the game master and instead replaces it with gamification. It makes the game master have mechanics and tools that they are accountable to make the story happen and make the game work. Now, this isn't necessarily perfect, but it is an example of the game making it easier and pulling some of the weight off of the game master and putting it actually on the system or the player. Well, let me do a quick summary or a brief version of how the Daggerheart system works. Every time you make a roll, you actually you roll 2 d12s, and one of them represents hope and one of them represents fear. Anytime you roll fear, the GM gets a fear point, a fear token. And anytime you roll hope, the player gets a hope token. The GM actually is able to use those points to make moves and make actions against the players. And some could argue that this makes it a GM versus player, but some could also argue that it's always going to be GM versus player if there's going to be monsters or enemies for the players to fight. And in this case, the GM versus player is actually a benefit because it is supported by a system, and the players can actually see the tokens, especially if they're visible. They're not always required to be visible, but especially if they're visible, the players can actually see that the GM has a certain number of fear tokens, and they know that there's a high threat happening in their current state of the game. Another example of another way to gamify, as I'm calling it, the GM's system or take weight off of it is actually in my system, Shadow Ray. I am experimenting with some more options, but one of the areas that I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep is it's called an opportunity point system, and this is actually a form of leveling an XP. This system, basically, every time a player rolls a certain number on their d20, which every time they make a roll, they're going to roll 2 die, a d20 and something else. So every time they roll a 20 on their d20, they gain an opportunity point. And the opportunity points are shared between all of the players. And those opportunity points can be used during long rests to take control or exercise some amount of control over the story and play a part in the overarching story. So they can do things like spend opportunity points to name characters that have been referenced but have never been named, just for fun. This can be just out of a bit of chaos or fun, but also they can do things as like dramatic as set a goal. And setting a goal allows them, the GM will then respond with how many points that goal is worth. Somewhere between 200 and, well, actually it's somewhere between 0 and 1,000 points. And every time the players as a whole get to 1,000 points, they level up. And this system is basically set up so that the players take part in creating goals. And this helps the GM know what the players are aiming for, because they can clearly see, oh, the players have set this as a goal, and I think this goal is actually really priority and important to the story, so I'm going to mark it worth 800 points. And now the players get to walk around in this world and know, oh, that's worth 800 points, let's go for that. And the GM doesn't have to wonder, are they going to go off and do something completely different? The GM knows these players are aiming for that 800 points. They're going to seek out this goal. And then let's say the goal is that they want to rescue a princess. And the GM will know these players are actively invested in rescuing this princess because they chose the goal of rescuing the princess. And I told them that it was worth 800 points. So I can create a quest that tugs on their interest in rescuing the princess. Now this system is actually just, I'm looking at more options, but in Shadowray this really helps with the GM know what the players are going to do. It helps them not have to wonder and not have to play on a million options. But it also helps the players take part in the story. And whenever the players take part in the story, that's less work that the GM has to do. So those are really the main different ways that I've encountered different systems take weight off of the GM. There's actually more. I could talk about how Monster of the Week just has a really clear template, and it's just because the system is so defined and structured that the Monster of the Week, they have a very clear like sunrise, sunset, time of day metaphor that they use to give the GM a very specific guide on how to build their campaign or their one-shot or whatever you want to call it. And that helps the GM stay on track and know their goals very clearly. So there's a lot of different ways, and it really depends on the system and the scope of the system. But let me know in the comments if there's anything that you think I missed. And also, obviously, please like, subscribe. This is still a new channel, and anything you can do to help boost will also help boost your experience of this as I get more comments, as there's more community to engage with. This could really actually help you as well as me if this channel continues to grow, and together we can make TTRPGs more accessible for everyone, veterans and newbies alike.